Dr. Valentino Blackwood had experienced many firsts in his 30-year career as a trauma surgeon, but treating a 7-foot-tall insectoid alien with translucent chitin was definitely new territory. The extraterrestrial delegation from Vesperia had arrived on Earth just 3 months ago, establishing the first formal diplomatic relations between humanity and an alien civilization. "The patient's hemolymph pressure is dropping," announced Dr. Oriana Morvell, her dark eyes focused on the monitor displaying unfamiliar vital signs. Whatever passes for a heart in Vesperians is struggling. The alien diplomat, Ambassador Kithrix, lay unconscious on the operating table. What had started as a routine welcome ceremony had turned catastrophic when the ambassador collapsed during his speech. The Vesperian medical team, having accompanied the delegation to Earth, stood watching, with their compound eyes glittering anxiously. "Their medical equipment isn't compatible with our systems," Valentino muttered, glancing at the strange devices the Vesperians had brought, "and they seem reluctant to intervene." The lead Vesperian medic, who had introduced himself as physician overseer, Trillax, clicked his mandibles together in what humans had learned was an expression of distress. "Our protocols forbid invasive procedures without computational modeling. Ambassador Kithrix's condition was not anticipated by our predictive algorithms." Valentino exchanged glances with Oriana. The Vesperians had shown impressive technological advancement. Their interstellar travel capabilities alone proved that, but their approach to medicine was bizarrely constrained by protocols and predictive models. "He's going into shock," Oriana said, her fingers dancing across the modified medical scanner. "Something's blocking his primary circulatory channel." Through a combination of hasty xenobiology lessons from the Vesperians and human medical intuition, Valentino had pieced together that Kithrix was suffering from something analogous to a pulmonary embolism. The primary circulatory vessel that carried oxygen-rich hemolymph from the ambassador's respiratory chambers to his neural cluster was obstructed. "We need to clear the blockage," Valentino declared, reaching for his surgical tools. Trillax's antennae twitched violently. "Impossible. Our models indicate a 78.2% probability of fatal complications from such an invasive approach. We must administer stabilizers and await consensus from the medical collective back on Vesperia. Your ambassador will be dead before you receive that consensus," Valentino countered. "I understand your concerns, but sometimes medicine isn't about models and predictions. It's about making decisions in the moment, with incomplete information, because a life is at stake." The Vesperian medical team conferred among themselves, their antennae touching in what humans had learned was their method of direct information exchange. After a tense moment, Trillax stepped back. "We will observe your methods, Dr. Blackwood. Our delegation cannot return to Vesperia without Ambassador Kithrix." Valentino nodded grimly. "Oriana, prepare for emergency thoracic intervention, modified for Vesperian anatomy, of course." As they worked, Valentino couldn't help but notice the Vesperian medics' reactions. They seemed simultaneously horrified and fascinated by the humans' willingness to physically intervene, to cut and manipulate tissue directly, rather than rely solely on pharmaceutical approaches and predictive algorithms. When they finally extracted the gelatinous mass blocking the ambassador's primary vessel, apparently a rare side effect of Earth's atmospheric composition on Vesperian physiology, Trillax's compound eyes widened noticeably. "Remarkable," the alien physician whispered. "You operated without a complete physiological model, without certainty." "That's human medicine," Valentino replied, monitoring as Kithrix's vital signs began to stabilize. "Sometimes you have to trust your training, your experience, and your instincts. Algorithms are tools, not masters." As Ambassador Kithrix began, showing signs of recovery, the first cross-species medical crisis on Earth had been averted. But for Valentino and Oriana, this was just the beginning of a much larger exchange of medical knowledge that would change both civilizations forever. 3 months after saving Ambassador Kithrix's life, Dr. Valentino Blackwood found himself aboard the Vesperian medical vessel, Exacting Remedy, floating in Earth orbit. What had begun as an emergency intervention had blossomed into the first interspecies medical exchange program in human history. Your approach continues to perplex our medical collective, Physician Overseer Trillax admitted as they toured the ship's primary treatment chamber. The room was filled with advanced equipment that seemed to operate without physical contact with patients, scanning, analyzing, and treating through invisible fields. Many still consider direct surgical intervention to be unnecessarily primitive. And yet here we are, replied Dr. Morvell, who had insisted on joining the program alongside Valentino. She gestured toward a viewing screen where several Vesperian medical students were watching recordings of human surgeries with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Vesperians had agreed to the exchange after Ambassador Kithrix's recovery, partly out of diplomatic courtesy, but mostly out of genuine scientific curiosity. Their medicine had evolved along a completely different path than humanity's, where humans had developed increasingly sophisticated ways to physically intervene in bodily processes. Vesperians had focused on predictive algorithms and non-invasive field manipulations, effective for most conditions but vulnerable to unexpected complications. Today we have scheduled observation of an emergency response simulation, Trillax announced, his antennae quivering with what Valentino had learned was anticipation. Our system will present a medical crisis with incomplete data, a situation your physicians apparently face regularly. The simulation chamber contained a Vesperian anatomical model, surrounded by the species' standard medical equipment. 3 Vesperian physicians entered, followed by Valentino and Oriana as observers. What unfolded was revealing. When presented with a simulated crisis involving multiple trauma and an unknown toxin, the Vesperian team froze. Their system required complete data analysis before proceeding, but the scenario deliberately withheld crucial information, just as real emergencies often did. After 10 minutes of increasingly desperate scanning and analysis, Trillax ended the simulation. This is where your approach may offer insights, he admitted, mandibles clicking softly. Our medical collective has identified 17 scenarios where our predictive algorithms fail to achieve acceptable outcomes due to incomplete data. Valentino stepped forward. Medicine isn't just about technology or data. It's about decision-making under pressure, adapting to the unexpected. Humans have centuries of experience with that particular challenge. Later that evening, over a meal adapted for both species biochemistry, Dr. Lavraxi, a younger Vesperian physician, approached the human doctors. "Is it true," she asked, her translator device giving her words a musical quality, "that human physicians sometimes operate using only what you call intuition?" Oriana smiled. "Intuition isn't magic. It's pattern recognition based on experience, recognizing similarities to previous cases, even when the data points aren't identical. Your species' computational abilities are incredible, but there's something to be said for the neural processing that occurs in the human brain when faced with medical uncertainties." "Fascinating," Lavraxi replied. "Our youngest physicians have been discussing this concept extensively. Some even suggest that we have become too dependent on our predictive models." As the exchange program continued, more Vesperian physicians began showing interest in human medical techniques. Meanwhile, Valentino and Oriana were equally amazed by Vesperian technology, particularly their non-invasive diagnostic abilities, which could detect molecular changes impossible for human equipment to identify. "Perhaps," Valentino suggested, To Trillax, as they watched a joint human-Vesperian team working on a research project, the ideal medicine isn't purely algorithmic or purely intuitive. Maybe it's the synthesis of both approaches. Trillax's compound eyes reflected the blue light of Earth, visible through the viewport. The medical collective is beginning to consider this possibility. Your species' willingness to act decisively with incomplete information is both terrifying and admirable. What neither species yet realized was how soon this synthesis would be tested, not in a simulation, but in a crisis that would threaten lives across both their worlds. The first cases appeared simultaneously on Earth and the Vesperian colony. Ship in orbit, patients, both human and Vesperian, developed symptoms that defied conventional treatment. Humans experienced rapid neural degradation, while Vesperians suffered catastrophic molecular destabilization of their exoskeletons. Dr. Valentino Blackwood stared at the microscopic images on the display, his face grim. It's artificial. Has to be. The molecular structure is too perfect, too engineered. Dr. Oriana Morvell nodded in agreement. And it affects both species despite our completely different biochemistry. That's not natural evolution. The isolation ward of the United Earth Medical Center was filled beyond capacity. Across the room, physician overseer Trillax conferred with his team, their antennae touching frantically as they shared information directly. Our predictive models have failed, Trillax announced, approaching the human doctors. The nanovirus adapts faster than our algorithms can analyze. The medical collective is at an impasse. The situation had deteriorated rapidly over the past week. What began as isolated cases had spread to major population centers. Preliminary investigation suggested the nanovirus had been deliberately released by a fringe anti-contact group opposed to human-Vesperian relations. We need to try something unorthodox, Valentino said, running his hand through his silver-streaked hair. Your technology can identify molecular changes at a level our equipment can't detect, but our experimental approach might give us the flexibility to counter this thing's adaptability. Commander Ilara Voss, head of the United Earth Defense Medical Corps, joined their discussion. Her weathered face showed the strain of sleepless nights coordinating the global response. The death toll has reached 5,000 on Earth, she reported. How are things on your colony ship, physician overseer? 817 casualties, Trillax replied, his normally melodious translator voice flat with distress. Our eldest and youngest are most vulnerable, as the virus seems to target transitional cellular states. Oriana suddenly straightened. That's it, transitional states. The virus isn't attacking stable cellular structures, it's targeting cells in the process of changing. This revelation sparked a frenzy of collaborative research. Human doctors contributed their experience with experimental treatments and rapid adaptation of protocols, while Vesperian physicians provided unprecedented molecular analysis and modeling capabilities. Dr. Praxides Kalostri, a xenobiochemist who had recently joined the exchange program, made the critical breakthrough. The nanovirus has a pattern beneath its adaptability, he explained, pointing to a three-dimensional molecular model hovering above the conference table. It's like a jazz musician improvising but following underlying harmonic rules. If we can identify those rules, Valentino added, we can develop a countermeasure that anticipates its adaptations rather than chasing them. The next 72 hours saw an unprecedented collaboration. Human doctors worked alongside Vesperian physicians, combining intuitive leaps with rigorous modeling. Traditional hierarchies dissolved as ideas flowed freely between specialists, technicians, and even patients who had medical backgrounds. When they finally synthesized the countermeasure, a novel combination of human-developed retrovirals and Vesperian molecular stabilizers, It was Trillax who insisted on the first human trial, and Valentino who volunteered to administer the first Vesperian treatment. Your species taught us that sometimes medicine requires faith in addition to data, Trillax explained as he received the injection. A calculated risk based on incomplete information. As the countermeasure began showing promising results, Dr. Calostri made an observation that would echo through both civilizations. This crisis has revealed something profound. Vesperian medicine perfected the science of prediction and prevention, while human medicine mastered adaptation and intervention. Neither approach alone could have saved us today. The nanovirus was ultimately defeated, though not without significant casualties. Yet from this tragedy emerged a new paradigm of interspecies medicine, one that would soon face an even greater test. 6 months after the nanovirus crisis, the integrated human Vesperian medical team faced their greatest challenge. Yet, on the frontier outpost of Proxima Centauri b, an explosion at the Joint Research Facility had left dozens of personnel, both human and Vesperian, in critical condition. Dr. Valentino Blackwood surveyed the chaos as their medical shuttle descended. Toward the damaged facility, emergency beacons cast an eerie red glow over the twisted metal and shattered dome sections exposed to the thin atmosphere. Triage protocols activated, announced Dr. Oriana Morvell, her voice steady despite the dire circumstances. We're registering 27 human life signs and 19 Vesperian, all with varying degrees of trauma and atmospheric exposure. Physician Overseer. Trillax's compound eyes reflected the emergency lights as he prepared the advanced field equipment developed through their collaborative research. The environmental conditions are complicating factors. Proxima's radiation will accelerate cellular damage in exposed tissues. The shuttle landed, and the mixed medical team deployed with practiced efficiency. What they found inside the facility was worse than their scans had indicated. Several victims had been clinically dead for minutes, a circumstance where traditional Vesperian medicine would have declared intervention futile. Implement the Lazarus Protocol, Valentino ordered, naming the experimental procedure they had. Developed but never tested in field conditions. We have a 4-minute window for the humans and approximately 6 for the Vesperians. The Lazarus Protocol represented the pinnacle of their combined medical philosophies. Vesperian precision and molecular manipulation merged with human adaptability and aggressive intervention. For patients beyond conventional resuscitation, it offered one last chance. Dr. Milin Kwan, the team's neural specialist, worked alongside Vesperian physician Nevras on the most critical human patient, a young researcher named Dr. Finch Holloway, who had been closest to the explosion. Conventional scans showed no brain activity. Beginning neural stasis field, Nevras announced, activating a device that enveloped Finch's head in a shimmering blue light. Molecular degradation temporarily halted. Dr. Kwan inserted a specialized neural interface, initiating synaptic mapping and targeted stimulation. We're essentially jump-starting his brain while the Vesperian technology prevents further damage. Across the facility, similar scenes played out as the integrated team worked against time. The procedure required perfect synchronization between human surgical intervention and Vesperian molecular stabilization, a dance of technologies that would have been impossible months earlier. There's something poetic about this, Oriana remarked to Valentino as they moved between patients. Humans contribute the aggressive refusal to accept death, while Vesperians provide the precise understanding of life at its most fundamental level. 4 hours later, the immediate crisis had passed. Of the 46 critical patients, 42 had been stabilized, including 12 who would have been considered beyond saving by either species' medical standards alone. As Dr. Finch Holloway Regained consciousness, his neural functions intact despite having been clinically dead for nearly 5 minutes, Trillax approached Valentino with what humans had learned to recognize as the Vesperian expression of profound respect. Antennae lowered and mandibles slightly parted. My species has always prided itself on understanding the universe through prediction and analysis, the Vesperian physician said quietly. Yet you humans taught us something we had forgotten, that sometimes the most advanced approach is to simply refuse to accept failure even when all models predict it. Valentino shook his head. And you taught us that intuition without precision is just desperation. Neither of our approaches alone could have saved these people today. As they prepared to transport the stabilized patients to the orbital medical facility, news arrived that would once again test their combined medical philosophy. An unknown pathogen had been released during the explosion, with both species showing the first symptoms of infection. The orbital medical station above Proxima Centauri B had transformed into an impromptu research facility. 6 weeks after the explosion, the mysterious pathogen continued to spread despite containment efforts. What made this outbreak particularly baffling was its dual nature. It manifested differently in humans and Vesperians, yet genetic analysis proved it was a single organism. Dr. Valentino Blackwood hadn't slept properly in days. Neither had physician overseer Trillax, whose normally iridescent exoskeleton had dulled with exhaustion. Their teams had been working around the clock, applying every technique from both medical traditions. The pathogen adapts to our treatments faster than we can develop them, Oriana reported during the morning briefing. Dark circles underlined her eyes. It's as if it's learning from our approaches. It's not just learning, it's synthesizing, Dr. Finch Holloway interjected. Having recovered from his near-death experience, he had insisted on joining the research team. Look at these molecular patterns. The pathogen is incorporating elements of both Vesperian and human biochemistry into its structure. Trillax's antennae quivered as he studied the holographic display. Fascinating. Just as our medical traditions have begun to merge, this organism represents a synthesis of our biologies. A perfect metaphor, if it weren't killing us. The situation had become desperate. Over 300 colonists were infected, with the first deaths occurring among both species. Conventional treatments merely slowed the progression without stopping it. During a rare break, Valentino stood at the observation window, gazing down at the rust-colored surface of Proxima Centauri B. Trillax joined him, the Vesperian's compound eyes reflecting the planet below. "I've been studying human history," Trillax said unexpectedly. "Your species has faced extinction-level threats countless times, yet you've survived through what appears to be sheer stubbornness." Valentino smiled wearily. "We call it hope, sometimes. Or faith, the belief that there's always a solution, even when we can't see it yet." "Vesperians would call such thinking irrational," Trillax replied. "Yet I find myself hoping, despite all evidence." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Vexitalia, a young Vesperian physician who had embraced human medical approaches with particular enthusiasm. She burst into the observation deck, antennae erect with excitement. "I believe I've found something," she announced. "The pathogen isn't actually trying to kill us. It's attempting to create a symbiotic relationship, but incompatibly." This revelation sparked a new direction in their research. If the pathogen was attempting symbiosis rather than destruction, perhaps the key wasn't to kill it, but to redirect it. The solution that emerged combined Vesperian molecular reconfiguration, technology with human immunotherapy techniques, essentially teaching the pathogen how to coexist with both species harmlessly. The treatment was experimental, radical, and based partly on intuition rather than complete data. Precisely the kind of medicine that represented their new shared approach. "We'll need to administer it simultaneously to all patients," Valentino explained during the final briefing. The pathogen communicates between hosts. If we don't synchronize, it might adapt against the treatment. The logistics were daunting. Over 300 patients across multiple facilities needed to receive the treatment within the same 15-minute window. It required perfect coordination between human and Vesperian medical teams who just months earlier had barely understood each other's basic approaches. As the moment of treatment arrived, Dr. Ilara Voss, who had traveled from Earth to oversee the crisis, stood beside Ambassador Kithrix, whose life Valentino had saved during their first encounter. "Whatever happens," the ambassador said, his translator conveying the solemnity in his clicks and whistles, "this represents the true beginning of our species cooperation. Not diplomatic agreements, but hands and appendages working together. To preserve life, the treatment was administered. For 3 tense days, they monitored the results. On the 4th morning, Valentino and Trillax stood before the assembled medical teams, human and Vesperian alike. "The pathogen has been successfully reconfigured," Valentino announced. "All patients are showing signs of recovery." "More than recovery," Trillax added. "The redirected symbiosis appears to be strengthening their immunological responses. They may emerge stronger than before." The celebration that followed transcended species differences. Human doctors embraced their Vesperian colleagues, carefully mindful of exoskeletons, while patients from both worlds shared the unique bond of having survived together. Later, as the first recovered patients were discharged, Ambassador Kithrix made a formal announcement: the establishment of the Interspecies Medical Academy, to be built in neutral space between Earth and Vesperia. "Today marks the end of separate medical traditions," the ambassador declared. "What emerges instead is something greater than either alone, a synthesis of Vesperian precision and human intuition, of algorithmic perfection and adaptive improvisation." As Valentino watched the ceremony, Oriana by his side and their Vesperian colleagues nearby, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a single emergency surgery months ago. What had started as humans showing alien medics how it's done had transformed into something far more profound: 2 species learning that their different approaches to medicine, and perhaps to life itself, were not opposing philosophies, but complementary strengths. "You know," Valentino said quietly to Trillax, "I think this is just the beginning." The Vesperian physician's antennae curved in what Valentino now recognized as a smile. "Indeed, my friend, the universe contains countless species, each with their own medical traditions. Imagine what we might learn and teach together." As they looked out at the stars, visible through the station's dome, the former barriers between human doctors and alien medics had dissolved completely, replaced by something stronger, a shared commitment to preserving life in all its forms throughout the cosmos.